was started as a way of bringing community together, and the idea behind it is that we grow food for free and food for everyone, and that's the role that that our volunteers have here. Anybody can access the garden. There's no locks on the gates. The gates are only to keep the deer out, and we grow all this food, and it really, I have to say that it's due because of our volunteers. We have a real strong core group of volunteers who help out in the garden, planting, weeding, fighting aphids off, and it's something that we actually really believe in, is having food accessible to everyone. We have a partnership with Village by the Station. We put food out in the cooler, because some of the residents here are in assisted living, and so they cook for themselves, and they're able to access the food even though they may be in a wheelchair or in a walker. The coolers allow them to access the food. And yet, you know, we've had meetings here where we've had young people in their 20s coming and peeking inside the cooler to see what they have and see what's there. So really, this garden is for everybody, young and old.
So just harvesting for our cooler that we put out, and so just pulled some radishes out of the garden. They're just starting to wind down now, and so we'll probably replant some more radishes just to keep it going through the summer. I've already pulled some green onions and put those out in the cooler, and I've got some peas as well that we have picked off the vine here. There's another one, snow peas and then regular peas. So we've got snow peas here, and we have regular peas.
The beets are coming.
The beets are coming. Of course, they're not ready to be picked yet. On this side, the snow peas are dying down. So I pulled those the other day, and we're talking about probably planting maybe some green beans, maybe some bush beans in there, and just to kind of keep things going through the summer.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits we have of growing or living in the Okanagan is we have a really long growing season.
Mm-hmm. That gives us an opportunity to do rotational planting. And rotational planting would be you plant your early vegetables, so that would be like your peas and your onions and radishes and spinach. And then after that starts to die off, you know, usually about the end of June, beginning of July, then you just pull the plants that are starting to die off. You'll notice on the other side here, some of the plants, the peas, the vines are starting to get yellow. And so we'll pull those out, and then we might plant maybe some carrots in there, or maybe some parsnips, or some beets. Not sure yet, but it does allow us room to be able to plant more things, so that when we go into fall, we've got the beets coming in that we planted in July. We've got some romaine lettuce here that we're growing. You know, Chandra, I have to say that planting the sunflowers has been such a good idea. I can't believe how many bees I see hovering around the sunflowers.
Yeah.
They're a really big attractor.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. And what I noticed too is that there's lots of native species too, or native bees, native pollinators, so not your typical honeybee, but I see sort of a green colored one, shiny green metallic one, which is a sweat bee.
Oh yeah.
And then I don't see any bumblebees here, but we do have bumblebees that are native pollinators as well.
Yeah, you can see them all buzzing around there.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we've got that bee bath so they can go and get a drink when they get thirsty.
Yeah. Yeah, everything needs water. These bags are really great. They're watering bags, and they come in kind of like a shape of a triangle with the tip cut off, and they have a zipper on the ends, and you wrap it around the tree and zip it up, and then there's a hole here for you to put water in, and it seeps out and waters the tree slowly over a number of days, over 9 hours it says. So it really helps us out as volunteers because we can't always be here at the garden working at the garden. So this way we know that our trees are being watered even in the heat. These are Gala Apples, and they were part of a Tree Canada grant that we got. One of our members brought it forward to us, Christy Tatabi, and said we should apply for this, and we did. So we have 3 galas, and then we'll have 2 Bartlett pears that we're going to espalier along the fence here. And then we also got 10 blueberry bushes, and it was part of a edible tree, edible shrub garden program that Tree Canada has. We got these blueberries planted, and we purchased them through the grant. And it's part of the food forest, which the idea behind a food forest is that you have plants that are growing together like you would in a forest. So you have trees that are tall in the canopy, and then you have your understory plants like the blueberries, and then you would have plants that help them. So we have like comfrey, which provides nutrients to the plants. You could have a nitrogen fixer like wolf willow, which would also provide nitrogen to the soil. So what happens is these plants start growing together as they would in a forest with no input from the people, and so that's the idea behind the food forest. This plant is comfrey, and it's not in its finest right now. It's kind of really hot. It doesn't like the hot seasons, but we try to water it. And what it is it's a really good at sucking different nutrients, micronutrients out of the soil. And you can take the leaves and you soak them in water and make a tea. And then you can feed it as a fertilizer for your plants in the garden. And we have that growing next to here, which Alice is going to water. We have a bee bath or a bee fountain. And what it is, oh, there's a bee. I'm going to rescue this bee. There you go. So as you can see, bees don't do very well when you have a lot of water. And so what you do is you put a container of water with lots of rocks in it, and we've got shells and decorative stones in there as well. And the idea is that the bees can walk along the edge of the rocks and access the water there. I'm just trying to rescue this guy here. Because they can't access water very easily. So I'm just going to put this guy here to dry off. So
maybe make a comment about something to do with
pollinating.
That the bees need water, but they don't need a bird bath. Is just like a big puddle. And
that's right. Yeah, and you can see right now there's a bee flying in and it's looking for a place to land. They don't need a bird bath per se. It's not a big puddle. What they need is stones to stand on, and then they walk down to the water's edge and get the water that they need there. And bees are really important for, as many people know, as pollinators, and not just the honeybees, but all the different. We have bumblebees, we have mason bees, we have sweat bees. These are all the natural or native bee species that are pollinators. And then the wasps as well. Here's a wasp coming in right now. You can tell by the skinny waist and long legs. And the wasps are really important as well in the garden because they're the ones that will eat some of the pests that we have. So I've seen wasps looking around in my garden, and I think that they're looking for aphids to eat. Wasps and yellow jackets and hornets, they all have a role to play in the garden. They are actually the cleaner-uppers and in the garden. So if you have anything that's dead, particularly animal material, so like the dead worms that you might find or dead beetles on the ground, they're going to help clean those up. And even though we may not necessarily have the friendliest relationship with them, I don't like yellow jackets at all, they do still have a role to play in our gardens, and we should be thinking about that when we try and live with them.
We've planted some sunflower seeds in this area here because we have a really huge invasion of peppermint, and it's really taken over the area. You can see that We've got peppermint. We have pulled all of this down here, but the peppermint just keeps coming back. It's very invasive. So last winter we pulled a whole bunch of the peppermint and put them in pots because we do want to have peppermint, but we have decided that invasive herbs like spearmint, peppermint, lemon balm, they can be quite invasive, and so we've decided we're just going to keep them in pots, and that way we can still use them, but they won't take over the whole area. So the thinking with planting the sunflowers was Chandra's recommendation.
Well, it's a bit of an experiment because my understanding is that sunflowers will produce a substance out of their roots that slows the growth of other plants around them. So we were kind of thinking, let's try this out and see what happens if we plant sunflowers in and around the peppermint. And to my mind, I don't see very much peppermint under there. I do see some weeds, but I don't see very much peppermint. So maybe the peppermint doesn't like the sunflowers. And that's the idea behind the companion planting, is you have plants that do well together. Some plants do well together and some plants don't. So like basil and tomato are often planted together because they like each other. And so that's the idea behind putting those sunflowers in, is we want to see maybe they'll fight off our mint, which is an ongoing battle in this garden.
Yes, but like you say, it looks like it's just regular weeds there. And we do have some potatoes randomly planted around in there to use up the space there. So we'll be harvesting potatoes soon.
Yeah.
I don't think these guys are quite ready. Probably in the potato bucket, there's probably
I think so.
some, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also have horseradish in here, and horseradish seems to be thriving well here. So if anybody likes horseradish, they're more than welcome to come and dig up some roots. But what's really neat about these plants is thinking about what their growth form is like. So horseradish has a really long, deep taproot, and it is useful because it can break up the soil deeper down. Its taproot reaches down deeper and gets nutrients that are lower down and brings it up to the surface. So when these leaves die off, they're going to add nutrients to the soil that other plants that have shallow root systems wouldn't necessarily be able to access. It's really interesting to see how the plants interact and think about how different plants grow and how you can get them to work together or work for you.
Here we have a berry trellis, and in it we are growing raspberries. So last fall I got together with Bella and Carrie, who has helped with some of the construction, and I said, we need to build a trellis to grow raspberries up. I built a trellis at my house, and I can't believe how many raspberries I was able to harvest last fall. Every other day I was harvesting about 2 cups of raspberries, and I think it was because the raspberries, they weren't draped over on the ground, getting moldy and not enough light. So I have to admit, I saw this actually on Pinterest, and so I built mine, and then I was so impressed with it that last fall, early fall, I said, let's do this berry trellis. And so what it is you just put some 4x4 posts in, and this one, of course, is much bigger than what we've got at home, and then you just put 2x4s along, across, vertical, and then horizontally, and then you just get some wire. So we've got some good rebar, strong rebar on here that we've put, and I built this one actually taller than what I had at home, because what I found at home was that the raspberries, they were growing so tall that they actually were draping down quite a bit. So mine only came to probably about here. So when we built this, I said, let's build it a bit higher so we can really be able to put it right up through the raspberry cane. So the thinking is that you just, as your raspberry canes start to grow, you just want to make sure that they're growing up through these bars. So we'll just take a look here, and so far they seem to be finding their way, except for this guy. He's not underneath. So we'll just tuck him up in here, and we'll just pull that weed out and just check to make sure that everybody's growing how they should. This guy's in there. So it looks like everybody's growing out good. Now let's check the second level. So now as they grow higher, they're supposed to grow up through, which this guy is doing. And he looks like he's going to get to the next level as well. So we haven't harvested any raspberries off of this so far, this spring. But we're thinking that what we're going to be getting is a fall crop. Just think this is really awesome, and it's not hard to make at all. We got this as scrap, and I think we had a few scrap pieces of 2x4s around. So the composter, we actually built it out of pallets. So this is an open composter, and what we did was we used the 2x4s, and then we used pallets to be able to make that. And so we just have one side. So we had a sign made up, compost donations welcome. We have an arrow here to show which side that we're working on trying to build the compost up. So, and then what I did was I had some pond liner at home, and so we stapled that on the back. And the thinking is that you have it lying over your composter to help keep the heat in so that it will work and decompose. We have put fine metal mesh inside the composter just to keep rats out. It can attract rats. Composter, of course, as everyone knows, but to help with that, we have pots of mint that we have placed around the composters. We have Jean Carney from Village by the Station. She is the Recreation and Volunteer Director. And she's been actively involved and very, very supportive of our garden, Incredible Edible Penticton.
It means so much in many ways. For the folks that live here in the building, for most of them, gardening has been part of their life. They're no longer able to do that because of their physical frailty. But to be able to see a garden, to smell a garden, to come out here and watch people work, it just evokes so many memories and passion for them. Many of them, gardening was a huge part of their life. So it's a present. Many of the people that live in assisted living gaze out their windows and look down on the garden, and it says home. It's very, very home-like. It's huge. They are blessed to be able to come and get some of the produce from the garden. They enjoy that immensely, to come and get little treats that you guys leave out there for them. For myself and for the other people at Village by the Station, the garden means so much to us because it means neighborhood. It has brought our neighbors to our home. We are not new. We have now been here for over 13 years. Lots of growing pains with having a long-term care facility in a residential neighborhood. You have to have parking for the staff. We bother people, by just... But having a garden with an open gate that says, please come in, help yourself, it invites our neighbors into our home and provides us with a really beautiful partnership. I have had questions of interest from people that have come to the garden saying, this is a neat place. Can I volunteer here? It's like, oh yeah. So it's bringing our neighbors in, it's bringing the community in. It's a great partnership. Yeah.
If you were working at a facility where you had a garden like this, how would you see that benefiting the residents who live there?
Because they're going to get utilised fresh fruit and vegetables every day. Yeah, which is great. I don't think our residents could get enough fruit and vegetables in their diets. The benefits that they have. Yeah.
A brilliant idea, as some of the residents obviously had large gardens and had to give that up as their daily lifestyle, and now they get to participate here. And I think it's a great idea.
And you were saying something about being outside?
Yeah, as I said, it's good for them because they're basically trapped in their rooms, right? So coming out here, they get the fresh air, they get hands-on, they get to feel like they might have done like their whole life, right? Yeah. So they get to
Brings back good
memories. Memories.
The greenery, the vegetables, the flowers, and I must say the volunteers.
Oh.
You guys are so kind. Anytime residents are out here, you guys take the time to stop, engage with them, chat with them.
Yes.
It's huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to chat with them. I mean, they've got many stories and they've got the history. That's what they have, is the history of Penticton. We're just going to have a look at this pumpkin that the residents asked us to grow for them. They started this pumpkin plant, and so we planted him in our new garden box that Bella made. So here's the fella here, and I don't know, how much do you think he weighs?
About 20 pounds so far.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other day he was actually growing up against the wood when I was at the garden. So our concern was that we didn't want to break it off. So Alice and Bella, between the two of them, lifted it and they put a piece of wood underneath him and moved him a bit away. But I think the rate that he's growing, they'll probably be having to move him away again. So yeah, he's growing really well. And we're growing this because you guys have a contest. Tell me about that.
Last year, all of the long-term care facilities in Penticton had a pumpkin growing contest. It was to see who could grow the largest pumpkin. Many of the facilities had pumpkin attempts but weren't successful, pumpkin failures. We won the contest, but not because of the size of our pumpkin. It's what we did with our pumpkin. So we're so excited because we made a cart with a hole in the top. The pumpkin sits on it, and we actually carve a space like this, and one of the rec staff can sit in the cart, and actually their face comes right out of the hole, and it is our talking pumpkin. And it is absolutely amazing to see the residents interact with our talking pumpkin. Hilarious. So we took our talking pumpkin down the street to visit our neighbours, the Hamlets, and we went to the pumpkin party for the interfacility event, and it was just so magical and so fun. The talking pumpkin sat at our front door for a few afternoons and greeted people as they came in. So we're really excited to have a big pumpkin again. It shall be our talking pumpkin head.
Cool.
And we had lots of fun with that.
Do you know approximately how much did your pumpkin weigh last year?
It weighed, I think it was 60 pounds, and it was donated to us. So,
wow,
yeah.
That's a nice big
Yeah,
size.
it was. So,
Yeah.
but however big, we're just thrilled to have the pumpkin patch, and however big our pumpkin gets, we'll be able to use it for the talking pumpkin head. So he's got a ways to go.
Yes, he does.
We try to do it later in the fall, close to Halloweenish. So
Yes.
it's got lots of time to keep growing.
Fits with the theme.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that for us. I know we started it as a seedling, but just to see how healthy it is and how beautiful it's filling up this whole area of the garden.
Yes, he certainly seems quite happy there, doesn't he?
He does.
Yeah, amongst his other friends.
Yeah.
So, Regina, I know that every time I work here at the garden, we always see you coming past in your wheelchair, and you always stop and say hello and ask how the garden's doing, and you'll always ask, well, what is that over there that you guys are building, or what are you going to do with the trees? What's a espalier? So we were just, I know you were part of our ceremony that we had for Tree Canada. When we had the planting, we had the mayor here and a representative from Tree Canada and a few other people. And so you actually spoke on behalf of the residents as to what their thoughts were and what the impact this garden has brought to Village by the Station.
Yeah. People look at a garden and they think of food and buffets and stuff. And I look at the garden and see all the workers and think of, buffet of people. The food here, it's beyond the food. It's the friendship. It's the camaraderie that I see amongst the workers here, the volunteers that work in the garden. They're always very friendly to share, and if I You know, if the blueberries are right, they'll pick me a bunch of blueberries, or the cherry. Yeah, I want cherries. Strawberries. Stuff like that. And I know that people come in here. We're at assisted living. We're given 2 meals a day, but that still leaves time, you know. And people are used to going to the garden and getting fresh cucumbers or radishes or tomatoes, right? And you can't do that when you live here. But now you can, right? We can get fresh produce, and some of the people have had gardens for 70 years, you know, and they really miss that. So it's added a lot. And they've kept it so wonderfully well that it's a pleasure to look at. And I see people from all walks of life come in and get food. We have street people who come in now and get some food. And I saw a guy who looked like a lawyer come in and get some food. You know, and they're all welcome. So that's really cool. The only problem I see is trying to keep the bins full.
More volunteers.
Yeah.
We
are going to expand, aren't we?
We are looking at expanding. We did actually have an expansion this year, actually. It used to be an oval-shaped garden, and we got a grant from community foundations to be able to build a fence. So now it's nice and rectangular, and it is quite a large expansion. I didn't realize how large the expansion was until we actually started making garden beds and that. It was like, holy smokes, this is a really big expansion. So we've got a commitment from the residents in the assisted living and the head of Village by the Station, Jean Carney, that we could build this garden, or extend it. And then after a couple years, if it's still flourishing and doing well and we have the manpower to keep it going, then we can actually do another extension. And that would be actually going over like almost right up to the cement walkway over there. So that would be again like double. That would be almost double the size of the garden we have now. What we need to have help from the community. We need to have members. We're a small group right now, and we really could use members, new members to come and, to just, whether it's coming to help weed or to help with construction. We're very lucky to have Bella Schultz, who's very knowledgeable on building garden boxes. And she has built 5 garden boxes so far, and she's just working on another one now. But if we didn't have her, we would have to be looking at trying to raise money to pay someone to come and build the beds. So, whether we have a new member join that, say, is really good with social media, or whether they're maybe don't mind taking a position as treasurer, or they want a garden. Maybe they have their own garden, but they want to help out as well. I myself have quite a large garden at home, so I don't need the vegetables, but I come down here because I just think this is really great. This is a great thing what we're doing, and providing free food for the community. So we have a cooler we put out here, and it's not locked up at all. And what we do is whenever a member is down, we come and check the cooler, and we put some veggies in here. So perhaps, residents like Regina or other residents that are in a walker or wheelchair that aren't comfortable going into the garden could just come to the box and be able to choose what they like. So we've got some rhubarb here. We have a rhubarb patch over there. So there's some rhubarb here, and we've got some peas. And we, of course, have lettuce, and we've got some chard. It looks like we've got some peppers here. That's something new. I haven't picked any peppers yet, so these are just fresh from the garden. And we've got some zucchini, different types of zucchini, some yellow, some green. And cucumbers. We've got cucumbers in here. And we also have some peas as well. And then in the jars here, we always place herbs in the jars. So we've got lemon balm in here, and we've also got this is spearmint, and we have some chives over there. Our lead construction designer architect, Bella Schultz, who has built 5 garden boxes, and is just working on a 6th garden box.
Yeah, I joined the garden because I had a garden in Burnaby, a Baraga community garden, and I recently moved to Penticton last 2 years. And for about 5 years, my father was a resident here at the village by the station. And when I heard that Incredible Edible had a garden here, I thought, well, this was a perfect opportunity for me to volunteer and get back into gardening. So, because now I live in an apartment. So in the spring, we had a few work parties and managed to build 5 beds. So we got the garden started and got as much in as fast as possible, and now we're continuing on and building the rest of the beds. So today I'm building 1 more bed and hopefully 1 more in the next couple of weeks, depending on the weather.
And what do we usually fill the garden boxes with once they're built?
This bed, I'm not sure what we're going to put in. Probably some fall crops, maybe some kale, maybe some Brussels sprouts, or some beans, and maybe a new crop of peas. So we're not fully ready to plant yet, but as soon as we get the beds built, we're going to get the soil in and have a little work party and get the soil in and get something planted.
We put some wood in there, like branches, trees, like from trees, and newspaper. What else did we put in there?
Cardboard.
We put cardboard in there. We made sure to take the plastic tape off.
And
And
that was compostable.
yeah.
And it's like a hugel bed, and the moisture stays in the wood and all the debris, well, not debris, but compost that's in the soil. And then the soil's over top. And when you water, the water stays in the middle, and the plants develop deep roots, and they're more productive that way. So in the background, we have 2 hugel beds that were original here. They're humps of soil with wood and trees and things in them, and we're trying to design these the same way, but as raised beds. Makes it a little bit easier when you get older like me to actually be able to bend over and garden well.
properly.
Yes.
So you're working on our 6th garden bed here.
Yeah, it's going to be 10 feet by 4 feet.
Uh-huh.
So what we did is I cut all the wood, bought all the wood 10-foot, 8-footers, and cut them in half. And what we're doing is digging holes and just putting the beds upright. And then I'll put the cross piece on and level it and figure out where the holes have to be dug.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the cross pieces are on, we'll fill out the sides and the length, and then we'll have to put wedge parts to equal for the angle of the beds.
And you've got to work with the slope here.
Working with the slope, so we'll be cutting some of the wood on an angle as wedges into the sides.
And I see that you did that with some of them over here, actually.
Yes, none of these beds were actually level. Everything is usually on a side hill, and we've got one at the very end, which is quite a difference. So there's like 2 or 3 pieces of wood on timbers on one end, and about 4 or 5 on the other. So.
Constructing these garden boxes on a slope, to me that would seem really tricky, but you've managed to do it, and it's nice and level. How did you go about that, Bella?
Well, the whole garden that was donated is on a slope. You can see it's. So what we had to do is I measured it all out, tried to figure out what kind of dimensions of wood that are available without having to do a lot of cutting and wastage, and what area we have to work with. So I figured out 10 by 4 boxes, and then I had to calculate, well, if they're on an angle, how many pieces of wood. So we did all those calculations, and in the spring we were out with some orange spray paint, and we were trying to figure out the beds. So we're working on these like one at a time. So it took a few weeks to build them, but sitting and thinking about the angles and what kind of pieces of wood we need. And we started with the easy one. That one is basically level. And then as we got a little bit more expertise, I guess you could say, then we learned how to build it on the angles. So, and in this bed, we decided we would do something called the 3 Sisters. And this is something that the native American Indians would do. They would plant squash, corn, and beans, and that was their staples, and that's what they lived with and lived on. So normally they would plant the beans and they would grow up the corn, but in our example here on the other end, we've got
see
the
the beans, yeah.
growing up the
pole.
up the posts to support them. And then the squash grows below, and they help each other. The beans produce nitrogen, which helps the squash and helps the corn, and the corn provides the support for the beans. So this is what we tried to do in this garden, to give some examples of how that would work.
And the squash also, the big leaves, actually help to shade the soil, so the soil doesn't dry out as well.
Yeah.
Because corn actually needs quite a bit of water, and so you want to make sure you've got enough moisture in there. And yeah, the pole beans that we've grown are a nitrogen fixer. So because this is a teaching garden, we were trying to show various ways that you could be able to plant. So we thought, let's do a Three Sisters planting. And so far it's working out. It looks like we've got a husk coming up on one of them there so far.
Yes.
Yeah. And then of course our giant pumpkin lives in there, and you can see he's quite content. We also have some potatoes that we have been growing in pots as kind of another form of showing people how you can grow vegetables. You don't need to have a huge garden. If you just have a townhouse with a little strip of soil, you can actually grow quite a bit of food in there. So the potatoes are almost ready to be harvested. You can see that the two black containers, large black containers, they're actually from a old recycle bin that someone,
Compost bin.
yeah, compost bin, sorry, compost, not recycle, compost bin that someone didn't want to use. So we, instead of throwing it out, we thought, well, how can we use this? So I said, well, let's try growing potatoes in there. Of course, the black does attract the heat, which the potatoes love. So I've kind of taken on that project of kind of watching over them and making sure they're getting enough water. And also, if there's flowers growing on top, if you pick the flowers off, I found this out last year, that if you pick the flowers off, you will encourage the potatoes to grow more. So now the potatoes are dying, the potato plant is dying, so that's a sign that it's done growing and producing as much potatoes as it's going to be able to grow.
And one thing I wanted to mention is West Coast Seeds have a donation program, and I applied to West Coast Seeds in Delta, Tawasin area, and they sent us 100 packs of seeds. And we're going to be sending them pictures of how our gardens developed. And each of us took a few packs of seeds in the spring, and we started some of the plants at our homes. And as they developed, we brought them down here.
We're just going to check on the potatoes, actually. You can see that this plant has died back. And so Bella's going to pull the plant. And this is the recycle bin that we were talking about. So she's just opening the flap, and we're going to have a look and see. Oh, one potato.
There's more. I can feel them.
They're packed in there quite tightly, I guess.
A few of them. Wow, this is a big one. This is a big potato.
Oh, great. Two potato.
Three
potato.
Oops. So this is how you can just grow them in. They like black. They like black because it retains the heat. And we'll just be having to go through this quite heavily. I did find that when you grow potatoes, you miss a lot when you harvest.
Well, we found we've got, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 potatoes so far.
And there's probably more down here. And that are the little tiny ones, which we'll probably leave in the soil, and then
Yeah.
there's more here too.
So that's just what we've gotten off of just pulling those 2 plants out. So it gives you kind of another idea of how to grow potatoes in a small space. We've got Alice here, and she's a member on the board, and we're also lucky to have her as our lead artistic painter, and she has done some fantastic work for us, and she's just finished up this sign that we're going to post at the garden now. And so, Alice, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about this.
Well, I like to do my artwork on recycled things. I have a passion for recycling, repurposing, reusing. So the wood from this sign, our other member Bella, her father actually salvaged it from the Mount Chapaca Motel when it was torn down. So this has been around for a long time, this wood. You can see I've signed it as Green Grandma because that's what I'm known as, because I'm so much into the recycling. We tried to incorporate some of the fruits and vegetables that we have here, and yeah, just needed a sign for the gate, something that welcomes people and tells them who we are. This one is painted on a salvaged cupboard door. So the whole idea behind this is that we're known as a community of kindness. So this was about using seeds to bring a community together with kindness. Yes, it's going to find a home yet. We're going to be hanging it from the fence, I think.
And Alice, just working at the garden, being a member, part of the community garden here at Village by the Station, what has it brought to your life? What kind of meaning does it have for you?
Well, I'm on a disability, so I also eat out of this garden. It helps me to be able to afford to stretch my grocery dollar and eat healthy, which is what I really need. Also, it gives me a sense of paying it forward in the community. There's this sense of being a part of a group that pays it forward, that there's nothing required to share this food with anybody. So, yeah, and it helps me to stretch and bend. It's kind stretching, it's slow stretching, so it's good for my joints and my muscles.
There was something that I read online about working in the soil is supposed to be good for your mental health as well. So, yeah, that's another reason to garden, come down and garden. And it just helps you to relax. I find when whether I'm just weeding in the garden here or picking produce, it's just such a good feeling. It's calming, and you feel good that, like Alice said, like you're paying it forward. You're helping people out who, well, whether they have had unfortunate incidents or even if they're just living a healthy life and they can afford to buy groceries, it's still nice to be able to offer them free food because it's free food and it's nutritional food as well. So, Regina, tell me about just life inside of the care facility and what that's like and how there's that connection with the garden. How's that?
Well, we have wonderful facilities here, and they do their very, very best. But it is an institution, and because of that, we get institutionalized. But we can come out here and have a touch of reality. You know, like real, honest-to-God life, the way that we've known it. Mm-hmm. And it's very refreshing. Some people try really hard to get away from the building, and now they just have to get outside the building.
Yes.
To find it. And you guys are always so nice to talk to us.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And
Thank
they
you.
stop their work no matter what you're doing. You stop, you talk to me for a little while. I'm starting to feel guilty even talking to you guys because you should be working. But
Gives us
yeah,
a break.
yeah, it's great. It brings real life to you, and we need that.
Mm-hmm. I've certainly seen a lot more activity this year. With the garden expansion. Last year there was some activity, but not as much. Like now, like there's lots of people walking by, and different people comment, "Oh, fantastic! What a good job you're doing!" And I talked to a couple residents who just they just said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing. It just means so much to us." And one lady was just in tears when she was trying to express that, and that to me it's so gratifying, to be able to hear the impact that you're having, that you actually are making a difference in people's lives. And, you know, what a great place to put a community garden right beside a care facility. Because as Regina said, there's, you know, gardeners that have been gardening for, you know, 40, 50, 60 years. And you can't tell me that they don't miss that. Even though maybe physically they can't do it, you know, they can still come out and be able to sit and look at the garden and go, oh yeah, well, there's the chard there, or oh, I see the grown potatoes. And, you know, sometimes you can even get advice from these old, you know, standby gardeners. You know, I mean, they've got the experience. We're always learning.
You know, something that I think really speaks to the importance and how the community feels is you're still using last year's cooler.
Yes.
No one's stolen anything.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's stolen the coolers. And you
And they're
leave-
not chained up either.
Yeah,
So-
like for 2 years now, they've been here. They stay here. You know, respected enough that they're not going to, you know, do anything to goof it up.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that some of the neighbors gave you chairs,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
at one time, so you guys had something to sit on.
Yeah.
And the neighborhood's really behind it.
Yes. There certainly is a sense of, you know, people just kind of watching over the garden, you know. I don't know that there's really many people that come and pick from the garden, but I know that they keep an eye on the garden. We had a garden harvest party last year in October, and the burning question for us was, well, how much is the cooler really getting used? And so I happened to talk to a family, a mother of 3, I believe, and I said, you know, it'd just be nice to know how many people are using the cooler. And she says, well, we live just almost across the street from it. And she said, oh, it's used a lot. And I said, oh, how do you know? And she says, oh, well, because we hear it open.
Yeah.
So she says, we hear it close, thunk, and then we hear it open. And she says 6:30 in the morning, 10:30 at night, we hear it opening. And yeah, no, it's getting used a lot. So, but like Regina said, it's amazing. This is not secured to anything. It's not locked up, but yet there's enough respect in the community and even, you know, passersby that look and go, no, I'm not going to take that cooler because that's a food source. There's free food in there. So, and that's just such a warm feeling to know that.